може да привличаме, да въвеждаме в професията и най-вече да се задържаме в професията млади и талантливи учители. Основни лектори тук ще бъде Джули Беланжер, която е анализатор в Организацията за икономическо сътрудничество и развитие, която ръководи и изследването Талис. Модератор в тази дискусия ще бъде Марчела Аврачева, която е регионален директор за Югоизточна Европа на TNC-BBSS. И други участници в този панел ще бъдат Анабел Бейтс, която е заместник директор на Арт Академи в Великобритания, и професор Атанас Гричев, заместник директор на Софийския университет. Пожелавам ви приятна дискусия.
Добър ден на всички. Радвам се да имам честта да бъда поканена да бъда модератор на този панел, чието заглавие е привличане и задържане на ефективни учители. Аз бих казала привличане и задържане на истински учители, които всички искаме да имаме за децата си. И удоволствие за мен да давам думата за основното представяне в този панел на госпожа Жули Беланжер.
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess it's already afternoon. I think we're possibly running a little bit late on schedule. I will try to be as quick as possible in my presentation. Some of you may have heard of the OECD, some of you may not, and I will not be offended, I promise you. So I work at the OECD and I run the project Talus. Many of you will have heard of PISA, and we've talked about PISA in the previous panel today. And PISA really measures the skills of 15-year-old students in almost 70 countries. Talus is the other side of that coin. Talus is the tool that we have to go and get teachers' perspectives on the education system in which they work. It's the tool that we have to ask school leaders about their opinions, about how their system supports them to promote learning in their schools. So PISA and Talus, I think, together can provide very good information about how your school system is performing from different perspectives, from the student's perspective and now also from the teacher's perspectives and from the school leader's perspective. So what I'd like to do today is to address some of the very common challenges that not just are faced here in Bulgaria, but in many, many countries in terms of attracting and retaining effective teachers. I think we all agree here, all of you who are here, about the importance of teachers. And at the beginning of today, we heard some of the speakers talking about memories that they have of their own teachers and the impact that their own teachers have had on their lives. And I think every single one of us can, stop for 1 second and think back to your own schooling and think about a teacher that motivated you, that inspired you, that taught you something that really was very meaningful to you. And I think teachers are really the key element when we're thinking about having a successful education system. Now we have Talus that provides us some information. At the OECD we also gather information from PISA, as I mentioned, but we have many other publications, Education at a Glance. I brought a publication with me here today. That is a publication that comes from a big event that happens every year now for the past 3 years, and there will be one next year as well in New Zealand, a summit that looks at the teaching profession. And it started in the US, and it was held in the Netherlands last year, will be held in New Zealand this year, or this coming year. And it's a forum where policymakers and teachers and unions, teaching unions get together to really try to improve the teaching conditions and the working conditions and the support that teachers get. And so today I'd like to go through some of the data that we have from this publication, from Talus and from others, to try to address some of these very important questions. Why do we care about all of this? Well, obviously, teachers are very, very key to student learning. And we care about student learning because that's what I think the common goal that parents have. I think I was speaking to Annabelle, one of our panelists today, that when she deals with her parents, she says, in her school, she says, we're on the same side. What we all want is our students to perform well, to succeed. And so all of this, everything that we're doing here today is about looking at the impact on student learning. And when we think about what has the most impact on student learning, we know from research that it's really factors that are related to students themselves, factors that students bring into the school, whether it's their own attributes, their own motivations, the background of their family, of their neighborhood, of their community, is very important. And that's the largest, really big chunk of the factor that will affect their learning. But if we look at the factors that are related to something that policy can make a big difference, so looking at school level factors, we know that teachers are the #1 factor that can impact student learning. So teachers are very, very, very important. And successful systems invest significant resources into attracting and training and developing and supporting their teacher workforce. So that's what the focus of today is. So what we're talking about here is really about developing teaching as a profession. So we can recruit, we can develop, and we can retain the highest quality teaching workforce that's possible. And this, as I mentioned, is a conversation that's happening all over the world. It's not specific to Bulgaria. It's happening everywhere. And these are some of the main aspects or the main factors that we need to focus on. And there are, they hide many others. This is very much simplified. But what I want to do is fly through how we can recruit top candidates, support teachers in continuing development, recognize and retain effective teacher, and improve societal views of teaching as a profession, really to try to make teaching the most valued profession in our society. There are some systems that have managed to do that, and so how did they manage to do that, and what are the key factors to make this happen? So I will go through each one of these, provide you with some key country examples, some best practices from other countries that we have found out about by having discussions and going to these countries and attending events like the Teacher Summit, for example. But I'll also present you some TALIS data, the survey that I work on, as well as other OECD data that point to very tiny little bits and pieces of factors that, if you put them all together, help look at how we can develop teaching as a profession, which will then help us attract teachers and retain teachers. So what is TALIS? Just quickly, in case you haven't heard of TALIS, now Bulgaria, I should say, has participated in TALIS in the first cycle and is participating in TALIS again, so I do have some Bulgarian data here. But TALIS is an opportunity, as I mentioned before, for teachers and school leaders to give input into the educational analysis and policy development in key policy areas. So it's one way of involving teachers and schools in having a voice in the policy discourse. We had the European Commission earlier speak about SABRE, the project that looks at really the policy framework and kind of the legal framework in which the education systems work. It doesn't really look at the implementation level. I think that project, along with a project like TALIS, that actually asks teachers how those policies are implemented in their schools, how they affect their work, is a really powerful tool that by bringing these two together to look at these data to get a better picture of how the education system is working. So TALIS is a collaborative effort between the governments that participate, teachers' unions, the OECD, which is where I work, as well as an international research consortium. It's a self-reporting survey that operates with representative samples. So we have 200 schools in each country that were randomly selected to then get 20 teachers in each one of those schools to have 4,000 teachers per country. TALIS really fills key national data gaps as well as international data gaps. What TALIS gives us is a way to find data that we can compare across countries and that we know that we can compare across countries. And in many countries, without TALIS, they don't have any information about their teacher workforce. So regardless about the ability to compare internationally, they don't even know anything about what their teachers do, how they're prepared, what support they say that they need, what kinds of attitudes they have about teaching and learning. So TALIS definitely helps that. Now, in 2008, it was the first cycle of TALIS, and this is the cycle that I have some data to present to you today. It surveyed 75,000 teachers, which represented over 2 million teachers in 23 countries. Right now, we are just finishing the 2013 version of TALIS, which surveyed 147,000 teachers, and that represents over 5.5 million teachers in 33 countries. As I mentioned, Bulgaria both times participated. The data for 2013 will be published in a report in June next year. So we're analyzing the data right now as we speak. So unfortunately, I can't give you any information yet on that. So I'm focusing on the 2008 data. But keep your eyes and your ears open next year, because there's some very interesting data coming out of the new TALIS with very interesting questions that we ask. So the other thing that's interesting with this cycle of TALIS is that we increased the coverage of teachers. In 2008, we focused on secondary teachers. Now in 2013, we gave countries the option to survey their primary school teachers, their upper secondary school teachers, and also to go to the schools that participated in PISA 2012 and give teachers in those schools the TALIS survey, to have a school-level link between PISA and TALIS in those schools. Okay, so now back to my wheel, and I said I'd go through those 4 factors very quickly and give you some key country examples of best practices and some key data points, either from TALIS or some other data that we have at the OECD. So the first one, recruiting top candidates into the profession and preparing them to become teachers. A few examples that I'd like to give, and some of these were given even by our colleague from the European Commission. Talking about Finland. Finland is one of those countries where the profession, the teaching profession, is very, very, very highly viewed. 1 in 10 students that applies for teacher training programs at the universities get accepted into these programs. So they really get to recruit the best of the very, very best in this system. It's very competitive. They come from great schools. They have very high requirements in order to get into teacher training. Their training is research-based structure. All their teachers have to complete a master's thesis, but it's a research-based master's thesis. So teachers are shown how to do research, how to use data. We've been talking about how to use data in the education system to really improve their teaching and to improve student learning outcomes. Singapore, another example where teachers receive salaries when they are being trained, so this is even before they become teachers, when they become trained, as if they were ministry employees. And they're eligible for bonuses and benefits. Now, in return, in Singapore, new teachers are required to complete 3 to 5 years of service as a teacher in Singapore. But in order to attract teachers into teacher training, they provide them with very significant support. Now, looking at some data from TALIS, when you think about what kind of environment you're providing new teachers, how do you attract teachers into the teaching profession? They want to say, well, what kind of working conditions will we have? Is this going to be working crazy hours with very difficult classrooms and impossible environments, or are there going to be some support systems for us when we first begin? Now, TALIS shows that the average class size for new teachers, so teachers who have 2 years or less of experience, are a little bit smaller on average in TALIS countries. But not very much. At least they're not bigger in any way. So teachers that come in don't have necessarily more challenging classrooms. Now the data, this is the average data for all TALIS countries. In Bulgaria, it's 17 versus 21 from TALIS. So 17 class size for new teachers compared to 21 for more experienced teachers. When we look at the percentage of time that new teachers say that they spend keeping order in the classroom, again, this is a bit higher. So we're seeing the average of an 18% for new teachers compared to 13%. So what it's saying is that there's 5% more of that time that's spent in the classroom for new teachers that they say they have to deal with disruptions, behavioral problems, things like that. And for Bulgaria, those percentages are 13 and 8%. But again, you see that gap between new teachers and more experienced teachers, showing that there's a need for new teachers to have some support on how to deal with disruptive climate in their classroom. Another thing that's important for attracting teachers is salary. Now, this here represents the average salary in US dollars for new teachers entering the profession on average. This is based on Education at a Glance, publication. But what I really want to show you here on the next graph, which is kind of really important, is if we compare the salary of teachers to the salary of similarly educated professionals in the countries, which are either in the OECD or in the EU, how does that compare? If for similar levels of education, you will see that for primary education, teachers in OECD countries tend to make about 82% of the salary of similarly educated professionals. The average is slightly lower for the EU. For lower secondary, it's a little bit better, but still, we're not quite even at 86%. And for upper secondary, we're reaching 90% of the salary of a full-time, full-year professional with similar education. So across the board in all of these countries, teachers are not quite paid the same amount as other professionals in their country. They have other benefits perhaps, and vacation-wise, perhaps they have other health benefits and other things that may overcome this, but it's still an important factor to take into account. So really the question is, how attractive are we making the profession for those entering it? There are many other factors. I just touched on a few here. I want to move on to the next factor, which is how do we then support the teachers with continued development. And here the OECD takes a stand that it's really important to view teacher development in the perspective of lifelong learning, so that we go from the initial teacher training education into continued professional development throughout the career to help the teacher continue to grow and adapt to new realities that show up throughout their career. Now, again, I want to give you a couple of country examples of best practices. In Hong Kong, they have mentoring and induction programs for all new teachers, which include things like a toolkit for teachers and guidelines for schools to provide support. They have mentoring, they have a network of teachers where teachers can rely on the help and the support of other teachers within their school and also across other schools. And they also have dissemination programs for research and good practice. In Canada and Ontario, teachers have to develop and review professional development plans every year. And this includes objectives that are part of the yearly evaluation with the principals, and these form the basis for the development, for the professional development and continued development for that teacher over time. So if we look at some data for TALIS, in terms of teacher professional development, it is very common. The great majority of teachers say that they get some form of professional development. The overall TALIS average is 89%, and I think that that is, very, very, very high, and this is in TALIS, it was in the past 18 months. But the question is not just, are teachers getting professional development? The question is really, how is this development provided? Is it really targeting the needs of the teachers? Is it provided in the most effective way? More than half of teachers say that they still want more development, meaning that their needs are not quite being met. In the next two slides, I want to show a little bit more about what do I mean by their needs may not be met. The next slide is a little bit complex. I will walk you through it. The gray bars show the percentage of teachers who participated in a specific kind of professional development, which is at the bottom. Those are the gray bars. The green bars are the perceived impact from that teacher. That teacher who said, yes, I did this kind of professional development, then did that have an impact on your work as a teacher? Did it help you to better your teaching in the classroom? So that's the green bar. The red star is the data for Bulgaria, so you can compare with the TALIS average. So if I take the first one as an example here, that's individual and collaborative research. Very, very few teachers participate in this kind of professional development. Just over about a third of the teachers say that they do this. But of those who participate in this, 90% said that it was really, really, really helpful. And in fact, this was the type of professional development that was ranked as the most helpful by teachers who participated in this. So what I want to bring your attention to are these areas where there's a discrepancy between participation and impact. The areas that are circled here, so individual and collaborative research, qualification programs, and on the right, professional development network, mentoring and peer observation visits to other schools, and education conference and seminars. Those are all examples of types of professional development that very few teachers participate in, but those who do participate in this kind of professional development say that it has a great impact on their teaching. So we need to do a better job at making sure that there's a good match between these. Now for Bulgaria, you can see that if I take, for example, the professional development network on the first one here on the right in the circle, you can see that it's even lower for Bulgaria in terms of participation, 20% for participating in a professional development network. but the teachers who do participate in that said that it was even more helpful than the average. So maybe we need to start focusing on developing more of these opportunities for teachers. Same thing for individual and collaborative research here on the left. Okay? The other thing that I'd like to point out to is the specific content areas of need for professional development. The green bars are new teachers, teachers with 2 years or less of experience. The gray bars are the more experienced counterparts. And what you can see from this is the areas in which teachers are saying that they need the most professional development are, one, teaching students with special needs. That's the #1 area. Both new teachers and experienced teachers say they need more support in this area. The second most is student discipline and classroom management, and this is especially true for new teachers. You can see a big difference between new teachers and experienced teachers, and perhaps this is an area where mentoring would be really, really helpful in these countries, where perhaps pairing a more experienced teacher that doesn't have maybe the same types of challenges in their classroom with a new teacher in these areas is helpful. You can see at the end with ICT teaching skills, there's a reversal where new teachers are less likely to say that they need some help and support in this area compared to more experienced teachers. These are the data here for Bulgaria, so you can see in red. I don't have stars for all of the different areas because the sample size for some of these were too small to report, so that's why I'm only reporting the stars where we were able to report the data there. Moving on to the third factor, recognizing and retaining effective teachers. I again want to start with a couple of key examples from best practices in other countries. In Australia, first of all, teachers can volunteer, and this is not mandatory, it's a volunteer program to be appraised and recognized for the quality of their teaching through a program that they call the Advanced Skills Teaching Positions. Now, this varies slightly, but they get further responsibility and specific roles in their schools, and these positions will recognize advanced teaching skills with formal positions and additional pay if they do reach these skills, and a better match between the teacher's skills and the roles and responsibilities that they have in their school. The second example I'd like to give is from Singapore, where they have this enhanced performing management system, which provides 3 tracks for teachers. So teachers can either go along the teaching track, and these are teachers who want to stay in the classroom essentially, but want to be recognized for the good work that they do in the classroom. And they can rise through this track to the rank of master teacher, and again, with higher pay that goes with this. Then there's also the leadership track, and this is where this track, if the teacher is successful, gets provided with opportunities to take leadership roles in the school, and then become more of a leader for groups of teachers in the school. And then finally, there's the senior specialist track, where teachers can join ministry headquarters and become really core specialists and help develop the educational programs in Singapore. So depending on the teacher's skills and interests, there's different tracks where they can get feedback on how to reach these career goals for them. In terms of data from TALIS, I can tell you that teachers that were sampled in TALIS really, really appreciate getting appraisal and feedback, whether it's from either staff in the school, principals, or outside evaluation. 83% of them on average say that the appraisal and feedback that they have received in the past year was fair, and 79% say that they find that the feedback and appraisal they received was helpful in their own development. The percentages from Bulgaria, even higher, 91% in both cases. So teachers want feedback, they want appraisal. Now, having said that, they're not necessarily getting it when they need it, because only 1 in 4 say that they would receive reward if they improve the quality of their teaching, or if they started teaching more in a more innovative way. This is higher, more than half in Bulgaria. And only 1 in 4 teachers say that appraisal and feedback is linked to increased professional development opportunities. And that is a really big missed opportunity in my view. Again, it needs to be connected through this lifelong learning system from early training of teachers throughout the development of teachers. So what these data are showing us is that although teachers value the feedback on their work, the majority of them say that they don't get rewards or recognition for improving, and that they're not receiving more professional development opportunities based on this feedback, and that is a problem. I'd like to point out one piece of data about job satisfaction and self-efficacy. So an important way of retaining teachers in the profession is to make sure that, one, they like their work, so they have good job satisfaction, and two, they feel like they're competent and they feel like they can make a difference. And TALIS does measure both of these constructs. And actually in 2013, we measure it in a lot more detailed way than we did in 2008. And I think it's important to look at what's different between teachers who say that they feel they can make a difference and they feel that they're competent, and teachers who don't feel as such. And in 2008, we found that teachers' perception, first of all, perception of the classroom and school climate is very highly related to their job satisfaction. I don't think that's a big surprise to any of you here, but these data actually support this. Also, teachers who feel confident in their abilities, they also tend to be very happy with their job and are more likely to stay. So if we know that happy teachers and good teachers are more likely to stay, how do we know how to make them so? How do we know to keep them in the job, make them happy, and make it feel good? We also know from TALIS that teachers who participate not in any kind of professional development, but in cooperative forms of professional development, and also who receive appraisal and feedback that consider their innovative teaching practices, these are teachers that have higher levels of self-efficacy. And in fact, we have a really neat little publication that came out last year on pedagogical practices and innovation based on the TALIS data that looked at this in more detail and looked at, in general, teachers who participated in what we call professional learning communities within their schools. And these are things related to professional development that is more collaborative, for example. These are the teachers that feel more confident about their work and that are more happy with their work. So really, I'd like to finish by saying that I've shown a lot of country examples here today. I've explained some of the data that we have from the OECD. But really, what does it mean if we kind of try to take the whole picture together? What is an effective teacher? You know, we have bits and pieces of an answer to that. We know from TALIS and other research, as I just mentioned, that an effective teacher is one that participates in this professional learning community. So how do you promote that in the school? How do you make sure that the school climate allows for this? How do you make sure that your system, that the educational system allows for this? Those are important questions. We also know that an effective teacher is a teacher who's more involved in collaborative forms of professional development. Professional development that involves going into other teachers' classrooms and observing them, that involves doing research with other teachers and communicating with other teachers, and even going to other schools. We know that effective teachers get more appraisal and feedback from their work, but also they get more recognition for good work, and they also get good appraisal and feedback for when they use innovative forms of practices, of pedagogical practice. And they can do that if they know how to do research themselves and how to use data to try to improve their own practices in the classroom. We know that good, effective teachers use a variety of teaching practices, that they don't focus on only one form. It's not one equation fits all of the students and all of the contexts in the classroom. They can adapt. And we know that effective teachers have higher levels of self-efficacy. So putting all of this together, now the question is, how do we create the environments in the school and in the school system to make sure that this happens, to elevate the status of the teaching profession and make sure, in the end, that you have better students and a better education system. So I'm providing you here with the website for TALIS, because one thing you'd like to know, perhaps, we're talking about using data, is that all of the data for TALIS is available on our website for free. You can go there, download the data, analyze it, do whatever you want with it, any research that you'd like for all of the countries, including for Bulgaria. And so feel free to go there as well. All of our publications are there that you can download on PDF. So feel free, and my email if you have any questions. Thank you.
Аз искам наистина да благодаря за тази презентация, понеже съм професионален социолог от 20 години. Признавам се, за първ път научавам, че освен популярното сред всички нас изследване PISA, което изследва какво могат да знаят децата, учениците, има систематично, добре развито международно изследване, което се опитва да отчита мнението на основните причини децата да знаят това са учителите. И особено ми е драго да разбера, че мога във всеки един момент да ползвам тези данни и да видя в крайна сметка какво мислят нашите учители спрямо учителите във всичките останали 30 страни, които участват в изследването. Така че това беше за мен една голяма и приятна новост. Искам, разбира се, да помоля нашите панелисти да да направят своите коментари и може би допълнения. Очевидно е, че госпожа Бейтс има, предполагам, доста повече примери за добри практики от най-различни страни, които ще ми бъде вероятно любопитно да чуем.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Julie, and thank you very much for inviting me to this amazing conference. As you've heard, my name's Annabelle Bates. I'm a Vice Principal in a school in London, Arc Academy, and I have the great pleasure and honour of working with a huge group of very, very good teachers. And in preparation for coming here to talk on this panel, I thought that the best thing to do was to speak to the teachers about what attracted them to the profession and also to working in our school. And perhaps more importantly, and as we were talking about earlier, more of a challenge is why do they stay in the job? How do we retain them? And in my discussions with the teachers, 4 key themes came out. So I'm going to share some of their thoughts with you. The first theme, and I think this is something that we need to constantly come back to, is the reason why people become teachers. And it's a love of working with children and enabling children to learn. And sometimes in our job, as in many other jobs, you can become bogged down in the day-to-day bureaucracy, paperwork, assessment, the sides of the job that are less enjoyable. And in all the teachers I've spoken to, I've never once had a teacher say to me that they went into teaching because of the paperwork, or because of the marking, or because of the reports that they have to write. So it's really, really important, if we're going to attract the right people and the best people into our profession, to remember why it's such a good job to do. And that's something we reflect on constantly. And I was really pleased to hear the recommendation from the Sabre report that principals' key priority should be the quality of teaching. Because if the principal's key priority is teaching, then it's everyone's key priority. And that came across time and time again when I spoke to our teachers. It also echoes something that Mr. Zlatev said at the beginning of the conference when he talked about learning for the sake of life. And the teachers I've spoken to talked about learning not only so that children can have qualifications, good jobs, be literate, etc., but also because they recognise the role that education plays in our society, that education has a significant impact on the quality of life within our society, on lowering crime rates and other such issues. So teachers to be aware of the power that we have when working with parents and other people, obviously. But to be reminded of that is really important, because it can be a really hard job. It's a difficult job at times. It's challenging. We get tired, especially at this time of year, as winter arrives. And so to be constantly reminding ourselves why it's important is something that our teachers do very well. And frequently I'm humbled by the positive approach our teachers have to our children. The second theme, and this is a bit of an obsession of mine, as my principal will tell you, is the importance of seeing teaching as a profession. I think that I was speaking recently to our director of English, who is one of the best teachers in the school, consistently great teacher. And we talked about teaching as surgery. And we likened ourselves to surgeons because surgeons have to have a great academic knowledge. They need to know their subject inside out. But they also need day-to-day skills, and they need to hone those skills constantly. They watch each other all the time. The best surgeons are watched by more than any other surgeon, so that they can learn from the best surgeons. And we think that we should have the same profile in society as surgeons, because our job is as important. Some could say more important, we teach the surgeons. So I think that it's really important that we talked about prestige earlier, we raise the profile of teaching. And that helps us retain teachers, that helps to give teachers pride. And we recently surveyed our teachers on how they feel about working at Arc Academy. And the amount of pride that came across was very pleasing to us, obviously, as leaders of the school, but also, again, humbling and quite moving to think that these people want to teach because they're proud of being teachers. And when I meet new people, for example, and I go to a new hairdresser, and they say, what's your job? I don't say I'm a vice principal, I say I'm a teacher. Because I think it's important for us to recognise that we're teachers first and foremost, and to challenge any misconceptions people have about our profession. The third area is financial reward, and this obviously varies country to country, but not just financial reward. What came across more with our teachers was recognition. So if you have a great teacher, you find out what their ambition is. Do they want to be a school leader? Do they want to do another role within the school? What drives and motivates them? And then as school leaders, find an opportunity for them to demonstrate and to use that passion. We have so many skilled teachers in our school who do all sorts of other things to support the development of our school, from running sports clubs, interest groups, all sorts of things. And those additional passions really help the teachers to see the purpose of their job in the school. It helps them see their role within the wider community of the school, and again attracts them to the job and helps us to keep them. And the fourth and final aspect, and I think this is really important, is the joy of being a teacher and the fun that we can have in our job. And as school leaders, it's our responsibility to also encourage that with our teachers. So we celebrate their success from weekly staff meetings, saying what a great success a teacher had with a particular child or group of children, to more high-profile events such as at conferences, sharing case studies of our teachers and what success they've had, but also publishing our success on our website, showing the hard work, the academic ability of our teachers, and really celebrating the profession. And I think that if we want to have all of our children become resilient and ambitious and love learning, we need to ensure that our teachers continue to have those qualities as well.
Наистина благодаря за този коментар. Особено приятно да чуем, че се говори за неща, за които ми се струва, че рядко говорим, гордостта да бъдеш учител и удоволствието да го правиш, а не само за ограничението това да се случва добре. И да продължим с въпроса от аудиторията. Вашия коментар.
Благодаря. Най-напред. Най-напред искам да честитя празника на всички днес, защото тази зала, разбира се, са хората най-много свързани с него. Това е празника на тези, които много преди вас са радвали по същия начин да преподават на млади хора и да видят в очите им да се поражда любов към знанието. Искам да кажа няколко неща, които са по-скоро българската перспектива по това, което чухте и видяхте. Това, което видяхте, е най-напред една поредица от индикатори, които ми се струват полезни за това да привлечем добри учители и да задържим добрите учители в училище. След това чухме и по време на презентацията няколко други критерия за това как можем да измерим в коя страна къде се намира по отношение на подобни индикатори. Струва ми се, че освен съвпадащите неща, има известна българска специфика, свързана с това, че през последните малко повече от 20 години ние се опитваме да насочим училището в друга посока. И това усилие до някъде успешно, до някъде не. Най-напред, понеже няма време, ще прескоча изцяло темата за възнагражденията на учителите, за училищната среда и за социалните придобивки на учителите. Разбира се, това е един от най-важните стимули за привличане на добри учители и за задържане на добри учители. Това ще го прескоча поради липса на време. Само ще кажа, че резултат на рейтинговата система, която е една от малкото добри идеи на Министерството на образованието през последните години, имаме някакви данни и един от случаите ни казва, че завършилите Софийски университет започват със средна заплата от 1300 лева. Всички, които са учители между вас, знаят, че учителите получават два пъти по-малко. Следователно, аз не мога да отида и да кажа на моите добри студенти, да им дам съвета да станат учители по чисто финансови съображения. Те могат да станат учители само ако има другите стимули, за които чухме току-що, а именно любовта към младите хора и желанието да ги видят научени със светнал поглед, разбиращи. Има обаче неща, които можем да оправим дори да нямаме достатъчно средства и някои от тях ги оправихме, а някои не. През последните 20 години започнахме с една голяма реформа, която е свързана с промяната на държавните образователни изисквания за учебно съдържание и с нови учебни планове и програми. И до голяма степен се справихме. Знам, че срещате големи трудности тези, които преподават в училище, но истината е, че имаме нови държавни образователни изисквания и нови учебни планове и програми. Можем да възразяваме за всяко от тези неща, че те не са достатъчно добре изпитвани. В някои случаи има неща, които бихме поправили, а в други случаи има цели програми, които не ни допадат. Аз имам поглед върху някои от тях. Например, програмата по български език между 5 и 7 клас, според мен има ред недостатъци. Или ако погледнем програмата по литература от 9 до 12 клас, от 8 до 12 клас, половината години са по-добри от другата половина. Или ако погледнем проблема с гражданското образование, ще видим, че пръснато в 4 предмета и в същото време създавайки нов предмет 12 клас, това е объркващо за учителите. Такива проблеми има, но все пак направихме тази реформа и имаме нови учебни планове и програми. Още по-трудно беше с държавните образователни изисквания за оценяване. Те бяха отлагани 12-13 години и когато ги направихме, мисля, 2003 година, аз присъствах на това как бяха претупани. Тоест, там много бързо, по някакви причини, за 1-2 месеца си изготвя една книжка с подобни критерии. Надявам се, че това се е подобрило междувременно и че критериите за оценяване са станали по-добри от преди. Разбрах, че преди мен е говорила госпожа Недестава, която е специалист по темата и знам, понеже познавам нейната работа, знам, че там нещата ще се подобрят. Една от болните теми на тази реформа беше какви да са новите учебници, които съответстват на това ново съдържание. И там е по-малкия на пръв поглед въпрос, колко да бъдат тези учебници. Няма да се пускам в тази противоречива тема, само ще кажа, че съм се срещал с 30-40 групи учители във всички региони на България и няма група учители, която в началото на разговора да не каже, че предпочита учебниците да са по-малко на брой, най-добре един. И няма също така група учители, с която като поговорим 5 минути и размени няколко аргумента, мнението да не се обърне в обратна посока. Проблемът е, че когато Министерството или друга институция попита учителите колко искате да са учебниците, неограничен брой 3 или 1, всъщност за това се крие един малко неправилен въпрос, в който има скрити два други. Въпросът трябва да гласи, искате ли при сегашната система учебниците да бъдат повече от 1 или от 3? Тоест, въпросът гласи, искате ли да ви поставяме всяка година в цайтнот, да ви връщаме от отпуска през август, да знаете, че след като оцените учебниците, това ще бъде скрито, фалшифицирано, манипулирано и накрая някой, защото познавам такъв случай и това да коментирам в съда, накрая някой ще събере вашите заявки и ще събере по грешен начин числата. Ако зададем така въпроса, всеки ще каже, не, благодаря, по-добре да бъде един учебник. Но ако зададем по правилния начин, нещата стават други, защото когато има конкуренция, няма да се опакваме, че в някакъв учебник има безобразие, а просто ще го сменим с друг. И така стигам до двата най-важни въпроса. Един е свързан с квалификацията на учителите. Там също нещата са двойствени. Има голям напредък през последната една година. Тя се дължи на финансирането от европейските структурни фондове. Има една голяма сума за квалификация, с която бяха направени поредица от 10 на 15 различни квалификации, като в момента. И всички те според мен са полезни, като се започна квалификация за изобщо за придобиване на правоспособност и се стигна до конкретни неща, като борба с агресията, интеркултурно образование и така нататък. Проблема и сега, както и преди време с средства подобни от Световната банка, е, че колкото и да са много и колкото и да е хубаво това, което правим, то е еднократно. Никой не знае, ще има ли такива средства в следващия програмен период, а и да ги има, никой не знае дали ще ги има след 2020 година. Тоест продължава след всички тези години да не липсва цялостното разбиране на държавата, че трябва да има системна квалификация за много неща. Първо за младите учители, както се спомена няколко пъти, да има едно въвеждане. Второ, да има квалификация, свързана с новостите в науката. Когато сте учител от 15-20 години, естествено, че няма как да познавате това, което се е променило. След това трябва да има квалификация при смяната на учебни планове и програми. Когато Министерството дори с добри намерения смени учебната програма, някой трябва да ги доведе в тази промяна. Отделно от това има ред други начини, например да въведат нови методи и педагогически, и свързани с новите технологии в училище, и някой трябва да ви каже това. Нищо подобно не се случваше последните 20 години. И ако искаме да се случва, първо трябва да се отделят средства от държавния бюджет и да се знае, че всяка година това ще се случва. И второ, трябва да се изготви система за такава квалификация. Това не означава държавата да поеме всичко. Напротив, аз смятам, че държавата трябва да поеме колкото може по-малко, но да бъде така добра да поеме голяма част от финансирането. Начинът да поеме по-малко държавата е като не превърне някой в монополист. Имаше дълъг период, в който три департамента, преди това институти, бяха монополисти в тази сфера. И това не е най-дълготачното, както се разбра. Сега те са към университети, което е по-добре. И според мен, без да се има предвид кой от департамент, кой от университет, кой от някаква една правителствена организация, трябва да се създаде конкуренция на този пазар. В момента ние се конкурираме с други университети за тази квалификация, за която споменах, и виждаме, че там, където са подбрани добре критериите, се класира най-добрия. Разбира се, в някои случаи е сложен критерия най-ниска цена, за да бъде по-лесно. И там може и един слаб университет да спечели срещу 5 добри, ако даде 5 лева по-ниска цена. Тоест, като се обмислят внимателно тези неща, има как конкуренцията да наведем най-добрия учебник и най-добрия специалист по квалификация. И за да не стана твърде дълго това, което говоря, ще завърша с нормативната уредба, въпреки че тя за мен е най-важна. Няма да говоря за трите закона, няма да говоря за това, че един от тях променяме от, може би, 3-4 мандата и че съзнаваме, че трябва да има нов закон, но все нещо става и го нямаме. Или че съзнаваме, че това, което е внесено, не е най-доброто, но нямаме думата, за да кажем, че е така. Ще кажа само, че това, което най-много ви засегна, наредба 5 и инструкция 2, тези две омразни понятия, не са изменени, или ако са изменени отделен повод, от много години. Аз се запознах с наредба 5 преди 12 години, когато влязох за първ път в Министерството на образованието и от поредица оплаквания на учители разбрах, че тя е устаряла. Тогава се опитахме да изготвим нова наредба и по някакви причини това не става. Имаше готов вариант, но не се прие. И от 12 години тази устаряла наредба устарява все повече. Хаосът става все по-голям, а тя е свързана с всичко, което изброих, включително квалификацията, включително това какви права ви дава тази квалификация. Няма да говоря за инструкция 2, която вече превръща това в един институционализиран инструмент да объркваме и директори, и учители, какво трябва да направят, за да заемат дадена позиция. Това също трябва да се промени. Разбирам, че нещата, които казах, са главно негативни. Разбирам, че ако погледнем тези 8 критерия, ще си дадете сметка, че за 20 години сме отишли много напред и че наистина имаме и нови програми, и ново съдържание, и нови учебници, и имаме сега за път повече средства за квалификация, но е хубаво да си кажем и лошите неща, за да знаем и как да го правим. Благодаря ви.
И аз благодаря от името на всички нас, макар че не съм учител, замисли се напред, че учителите произвеждат хирурзите. Очевидно те произвеждат социолозите и всички останали. Не съм учител и не мога да претендирам, че мога да вляза толкова бързо и лесно във вашите обувки. Но мисля, че за всички нас беше особено ценно да чуем този цялостен поглед на професор Герджикова, това, което трябва да се направи в системата, някакси отгоре и отвътре. Независимо от многото въпроси, които има да се обсъждат, това, което аз чувам, бидейки външен и страничен човек на цялата система, е, че системата е започнала да се променя, макар и бавно, и че тече диалог и такива опити вътрешно тя да бъде променена, така, защото да стигнем до възможността да повишим качеството на обучение и въобще да имаме и по-щастливи учители вече. И трябва да ви кажа, че може би се струва да се замислим над това. Обществото не го знае. Като човек, който непрекъснато прави социологически проучвания, когато се говори за образованието, извън учителите, училищата, децата и различните институции, въвлечени в това, по-малко се знае за това, че в тази система все пак настъпват промени и все пак всички въвлечени в нея страни желаят да се движат по-бързо, отколкото се движат в момента. Мисля, че това е наистина нещо, за което се заслужава да се замислим. Тоест, чудесно, че има конференция, говорим тези неща, но може би трябва да ви говорим на останалата част от обществото по-често. И спирайки тук с този така външен поглед наистина, мога да открия следващата част от нашия панел, а той свързва с това да поговорим, да зададем въпроси, да се опитаме по някакъв начин да превърнем в диалог с нашите панелисти това, което до този момент беше казано. Връщайки се пак на темата, сега ефективен учител за мен е добър начин това да се каже, но така иначе как да познаем, как да задържим и как да запазим добрия учител в тема на нашия панел. Но бих се радвала на вашите въпроси към нашите панелисти, които имат, както се видя, разнообразна международна практика и много добро познаване на българската специфика. Вече думата е ваша, уважаема колега.
Здравейте, аз имам един такъв въпрос. Сега? Добре, всъщност аз имам един такъв въпрос. Стана ясно колко е важно да бъде призната работата на учителите и нейната стойност. Въпросът е дали презентаторите имат конкретни примери за практики, как това може да стане първо на училищно ниво и второ как може да стане на ниво система, защото всъщност това, което аз виждам от едно училище е, че понякога не са съвсем ясни какви са системите и практиките за това да бъде оценена работата на един учител. И също така има ли механизми това да бъде, колкото е възможно, обективно. Разбира се, ние сме хора, ясно, че не може да бъде 100% обективно, но все пак какви са практиките конкретно това да се случи и да бъде все пак обективно.
Това са много въпроси в един. Благодаря ви, обаче, че това е първият въпрос. Може би ще отговорим и да събрем.
Okay, is this working? Yes. I'm sure that Annabelle will have some examples from her own school that she can share, and I think that it's important to think about this holistically, if I can say so. You don't want to reduce what a teacher's success is by just looking at that teacher's students' grades, for example. And I think examples that we had from the inspections from Jill's presentation today about how in-depth they go when they go and do the inspections of schools in terms of observation, but speaking with the teachers, speaking with the students, speaking with parents, or parent surveys, for example. And I think that when there is success that needs to be shared, whether it's on a website or whether it's through the staff meetings that happen weekly or monthly or how have you, I've spoken to officials in other systems that actually have a holiday which may be similar to the holiday that you're having here today, that is all about highlighting good teachers. And media is very, very much involved in this. And what happens on those days is that they have from each region's very exemplary teachers that are either nominated by the students or by the schools, and they share some of the examples of the best practices that they do in their classrooms and how they reach difficult students or how they teach in difficult conditions. And these teachers get airtime, they get media time, they're on television, they're on the radio, they're on posters, they become famous. They kind of become, they hold the voice for the teacher profession and to show that, a teacher can be recognized. And I think that, it's potentially difficult to do this at a system level, but maybe at a local level you can do something like this. There are many, many more examples, I think, that, that we could maybe discuss tomorrow for those of you who come to my workshop. Those are the kinds of very practical tips, I think, that can be done in a fairly easy way. But I'd be maybe curious to see if some examples of what Annabelle might have to say.
Absolutely. I agree with Julie that it needs to be a multi-layered approach. It's not one thing that's going to help you to evaluate and recognise your teachers. So in terms of evaluation, there are a number of layers, and I would say that objectivity is important. And we, as many schools in England, use the Ofsted framework because it's a recognised framework. By and large, we agree with it, Jill. And as school leaders, and actually all teachers within the school, we familiarise ourselves with best practice. So through the Ofsted framework and through the examples of good practice that are available And there are many of those on the Ofsted website, for example. And that allows us to make as objective a judgment as we can on the quality of the service we're providing. But alongside that, we also ensure that our monitoring and evaluation systems are developmental, and that's crucial. So we will be talking more about this in our workshop tomorrow, and Delia will mention it in the next keynote. But everything is about improving the quality of our teaching. It's not a punitive approach. So it's important to know if a teacher isn't teaching good lessons. But what's more important is to think, okay, how do we make that teacher, how do we help that teacher teach good lessons? And that is, first and foremost, about observing teaching as much as possible, and about staff development. And our staff development is very interactive. It's not led by one senior leader, it's led by practitioners from across the school, and it's very practical. And as I said, we'll go into this in more detail tomorrow, but if we want to recognise teaching, then that for me is one of the most powerful ways of doing it. You find an example of fabulous teaching and you ask that teacher to develop everyone else in that aspect. And the final thing, I'll just mention something as well that Julie alluded to. We also have a number of celebrations of teaching in the UK, the Teaching Awards. And our school is part of a network of schools, and every year we have a big celebration day called the Summit. It's actually next Monday. So all of the staff, teachers, cleaners, cooks, everyone goes, and we celebrate the best people in our network. We showcase the best work from across our network, and it really lifts the spirits. And it's great. We have our poster girls and boys for the day, as you said, Marcella, and it's another way of celebrating our work.
Благодаря и аз. Имаше други въпроси, заповядайте.
Моят въпрос е конкретно към господин Герджиков. Вие говорихте за квалификацията на учителите, това, което се случва тогава, когато те отидат в училищната среда. Аз бих искала да разбера с какво ваш университет промени начина, по който се обучават бъдещите педагози. Доколко университетското образование отговаря на съвременните нужди на българските учители. Изобщо как осъществявате тази връзка между висшето образование и нуждите на средното образование? Аз мисля, че е изключително важен този въпрос, защото това дефинира базовата позиция, на която след това ще градим допълнителната квалификация и развитие на учителите. Благодаря ви за този въпрос. Може би другите, които имат отношение, също биха могли да коментират.
Благодаря. Въпросът е много добър, но не знам колко аз съм подходящия човек да отговоря на него, защото не съм педагог, нито методик. Ако мога да кажа няколко общи неща като тези преди малко, защото съм бил на различни позиции, които ми позволяват да познавам системата в всичките й части. Доколкото познавам работата на нашите колеги и педагозите в двата педагогически факултета и катедрите по методика в повечето от нашите 16 факултета, се стремят да обновяват непрекъснато това, което правят. И сега наистина това става по-лесно, защото най-после има малко средства за подобно нещо. Но и преди те се опитваха да променят много начина на преподаване. Наистина през последните години това не се личи толкова, колкото в началото. Ако си спомняте, в началото на 90-те години имаше доста по-сериозна промяна в начина, по който се готвяха учителите. Пак казвам, няма как да навлеза в детайли, не съм аз специалист, излишно да се правя на такъв, но това е важна и специфична тема, защото първо, учителската професия е на практика регулирана в България. Макар че тя не е в списъка на регулираните професии като право, медицина, архитектура, тя от тези специалности в университета, която запази изискванията си за брой часове, определени дисциплини, това са характеристиките на една регулирана професия при нас. Така че там нещата се определят до голяма степен и на държавно ниво. И възможността университета да подобри нещата е в рамките на тези строго дефинирани от държавата правила. И мисля, че колегите успяват да го направят в областта на педагогиката и в областта на методиката, колко успешно, по-скоро вие трябва да кажете, отколкото ние. И за да приключа с това, дано да съм бил поне малко полезен, ще го свържа с това, което казах в началото. Един от големите проблеми на квалификацията беше, че се предполагаше, че в един университет хората са способни да ви научат до степен да станете учители, но след това, когато трябва да станете нещо повече, т.е. квалифицирани учители, това трябва да го прави някой друг. Това е едно от нещата, които аз опитах да кажа в началото и които на процес ще го формулирам сега по този начин. Очевидно, че пак университетите трябва да участват активно в такава квалификация и след завършването на висшето образование. Дано съм бил поне малко по-лесен.
Благодаря. Други въпроси, заповядайте. Само да вметна, имаме 10-15 минути, моля ви за краткост.
Аз съм Цялка Добрева и съм съветник в Комисията по образование и училище за това как студентите, за да могат да станат добри учители, трябва по-често да ходят на практика. Как се осъществява тази дейност, как се избират училищата, как се избират съответно студентите, учителите и как се заплаща труда на хората от висшето образование, които водят учебната практика и тези, които осъществяват в средното училище. Благодаря.
Благодаря.
Yes, this is a very, very important question, and I think it's a challenge in many, many countries as well, especially when there's a big disconnect between the institutions that provide training for teachers and the actual school system itself, where the teachers teach. One of the systems that I think really have this nailed down, I'm going to come back to it, is Singapore. And Singapore is interesting because it's a very compact system. It's essentially one big city, and it's difficult to perhaps implement some of the things that they've done. But I want to give you this as an example because I think they do a very good job of working together between the university that trains, it's the National Education Institute, I believe it's called, that trains all of the teachers in the system. And they work very, very, very closely with the ministry for curriculum development, for teacher evaluation, for teacher professional development. But also they are the ones that will find the schools where the teachers will do their internships, so their practical components of their training, but also do the follow-up on the mentoring and induction process. This is done through this university. So the schools are collaborating with the university, and there's a synergy really between what is being taught at the university for the education of these teachers and what they have to do after. It is very, very much practical based at this, in this system. And because the university is deeply involved in developing the curriculum of the ministry, there's a very close synergy between all of those. Now, in many systems this is not possible because teacher training happens in many different institutions at different levels, and perhaps even systems where you have a program like Teach for Bulgaria, where teachers are coming from outside of the teacher training program. This is another added complexity to this equation, I think. But I think it's very important to ensure that there is this collaboration between universities and how new teachers, especially when they come into the classroom, how they can continue to get support from the university that they came from, especially in specific key areas, like, for example, behavioral problems in the classroom, how to deal with disruption, how to deal with special needs students, these kinds of things, that there can continue to be that kind of support. So that is definitely one example of best practice that comes to mind for this question.
Just to add to that, we have a number of ways of becoming a teacher in England, and the best ways, just reiterating what Julie said, are those where there's a synergy between all of the people involved in training the teachers. And I can give you a number of examples. Teach First is a good example, which is our version of Teach for Bulgaria, where there's a good synergy between schools, the organisation, and universities in providing quality training for teachers. We also have a new program called Schools Direct, which looks specifically at people who have had some work experience. They're highly qualified graduates who've worked in other areas, now want to go into teaching. We have 2 in our school this year. In fact, we have 5, including the primary school. And they start as teachers from day 1 with a reduced timetable. Every week they have half a day of training. They are still getting their qualification through the university, so they have regular university training. This week has been a holiday in England. They're writing essays for university. So they do the academic work, but they also train on the job. And the amount of progress they make in the first few weeks is quite phenomenal because they're learning in class with experienced teachers. And I think that program works well, not just because of the quantity of teaching they do, but because of the synergy. And I think it's absolutely key that there is a good link between school and whoever else is involved in the training, whether it be university, an organisation like Teach for Bulgaria, because if you don't have synergy, then you can't really track the progress of your teachers.
Други въпроси? Заповядайте.
Здравейте. Дали си чувал хубаво? Деян Петров се казвам, част от алумни общността на задния час, първо поколение. Работил съм като учител 2 години, в момента съм проектен менеджер към Асоциация родители, съм докторант по социология. Имам 2 конкретни питания, свързани с контекст български. Струва ми се, че трябва малко по-историческия поглед на ситуацията в България, за да видим какво се е случило през годините на тези хора, на учителите. Едно от нещата е това, че от изключително силно престижна професия, това става много ниско престижна професия, това се случва на един и същи човек. Тоест, ти си бил изключително така влиятелен в обществото по едно време, имало много сериозен престиж дадения учител и изведнъж нали, системата тръгна надолу и както си бил важен, значим, уважаван, се случва точно обратно. Не говоря за всички училища, но в масовия случай нещо подобно. Друго нещо, втория аспект, който бих искал да коментираме заедно с вас, е затвореността на българската образователна система. Училищата са нещо като крепости и много трудно и учители, и ученици в тези училища намират отношения, взаимодействия с организации, институции извън тях. Това са колективи, които 20-30 години са били все същите и са развили лични взаимоотношения, които често доминират формалните взаимоотношения. Ние обсъждаме формални политики, всъщност вътре става дума за много така лични отношения. Неформални, да. Като оставам с впечатлението, че във вашите образователни системи така има доста добър човекопоток в самата система, но не знам точно каква е статистиката, но в българско училище много трудно се освобождават работни позиции, защото хората се пенсионират там. Това са ми двата коментара за отговорността на системата и рязкия спад за 10 години престижен професията. Благодаря.
А вашият въпрос, моля?
Коментар върху тези две неща и как може да повишим престижа на учителите, имайки предвид тези две обстоятелства.
I spoke about our school, and I can reassure you that not every school necessarily has the same sorts of teachers. I've worked in a number of schools, not just in England, but in Scotland as well, and there are schools like fortresses in the UK, and actually I think that's a problem in many countries. It's the job of the principals to break down the fortress. The only people who can change the fortress are the principals, and the way that it's happened in London schools, and there's been a big change in London in the last 10-20 years, is that the principals have been relentless in changing the attitudes of the teachers, and the teachers relentless in changing the attitudes of the parents, and the best media source for schools are parents. Because when a school is successful, parents talk about it. And that's one of the biggest reasons why schools in London have changed. In terms of the reputation of teachers, I still, when I say to the hairdresser I'm a teacher, I still have the reaction, why are you a teacher? That must be difficult. Why? I don't like children. You know, all of these negative responses. And I feel it's my job on behalf of all of us to say, actually, it's a good job. And I love it, and I do it because it's the best job. And we need to be spokespeople for our profession. We can't expect other people to change their opinions overnight. We need to change that. And it's a common problem in many countries. I'm sure Julie's recognised this in her work, that the prestige of being a teacher, which was there when my parents went to school, it wasn't there when I went to school, to be honest. I remember thinking, oh, I don't want to be a teacher. You know, because people didn't respect the teacher. So it's our job as teachers to change the attitudes towards teaching, and it's the principal's job to change the fortress mentality, in my opinion.
Извинявайте, за вас имаше господин, който бихте ли
Добре,
обяснили
на правото директор 17-та година. Базово училище към Софийски университет, към университетите за подготовка на учители ИРМ в Безансон и Бордо Хатко. Там има реформа във Франция в момента, която доближава подготовката на учителите, по-точно практическата подготовка на учителите към сегашната наша ситуация в България. Доколко това ще бъде положително, предстои да видим. Но моето предложение е следното. Да, много са факторите, които могат да допринесат и за отваряне, и за промяна на нагласите, очакванията, качеството. И ние всички прилагаме и търсим такива дейности и мотивации. Само че оказва се, че практическата подготовка на учителя е от изключителна важност. Преди във Франция учителите бяха на стаж. Техните места се заемаха, когато те отидеха на стаж в училището, учителят, който отговаря за класа, отиваше на квалификация. Нарича се стаж de responsabilité, т.е. стаж с пълна отговорност. В нашите университети това липсва. Учителите по предмети имат много слаба практическа подготовка. Имам дългогодишен поглед върху въпроса. С добра подготовка се отличават факултетите по педагогика, главно начална педагогика. Там учителите не се плашат толкова да влезат в класа сред децата. Предложението ми е, ако е възможно, този форум по някакъв начин да допринесе за повече практика и стажант учителство на новите кадри. Тези вече, които са станали учители, ние ще се стремим да ги привлечем и да направим така, че да останат в училищата. Но първоначалната подготовка, там има какво да се желае.
Много ви благодаря за това предложение. Не знам дали е в моите функции да приемам предложение. Чудите, че съм го приела. В всички случаи ще остане записано и разбира се е интересно да бъде обсъждано. Сега вие имахте въпрос. Може би последния сте вие, така че моля ви, ако някой иска да зададе въпрос, веднага да се регистрира, за да мога да си го запиша и да му дам възможност. Слушаме ви. Благодаря ви.
Благодаря.
Отдолу има и бутон.
Благодаря за възможността. Чуваме се, нали? Сава Ангелов, учител заедно в час, трето поколение. Въпросът ми е такъв. Искам да обърна вниманието отново на една от графиките с резултати от проучването Талис, нали така? Талис. Става въпрос за графиката, в която учители споделят нуждата си от обучение в различни области. Области като управление на класна стая, дисциплина и така нататък. Направим впечатление, че във всяка една от областите и новите, и по-опитните учители в България демонстрират по-ниска нужда или усещат по-ниска нужда от обучение. Въпросът ми е такъв. Смятате ли, че това е позитивна информация, която ни казва, че българските учители са по-уверени в това, което правят? Или може би трябва по някакъв начин да работим за това те да са по-отворени към нуждата от обучение, да осъзнават в по-голяма степен, че могат да подобрят работата си и ако смятате, че е така, как? Има ли някакви практики, които можем да приложим? Благодаря.
Благодаря аз.
Yes. Thank you so much for this question. It points to a very important need. When you look at the TALIS data, what I was presenting, of course, was the international TALIS average with specific data for Bulgaria. And I think that each country that has the TALIS data, so including Bulgaria, needs to do some more in-depth analyses of these data to look at these specific responses of teachers, to see those teachers who say that they need perhaps less need in professional development in these areas that you were just mentioning. Is it because those teachers actually got more of this professional development. These data are available in the database, which of course can be analyzed and put into the Bulgarian context. It's very, very difficult to take a data point from Bulgaria and try to say, does that mean that the situation is better in Bulgaria than on the TALIS average? Because there's so many other contextual factors that need to be taken into account. So I know that there was a national report for Bulgaria done with the 2008 data, and it was done by the same organization that does the PISA national reports. So I'm sure it is available, and they could look into it a little bit more deeply. But I think it is probably not. It's probably not the right conclusion to say that because the average of perceived need was a bit lower than the TALIS average, it means that the need is lower in Bulgaria. I think it's too premature to say that.
Благодаря. Понеже гледахте през мен към цялото време, и аз съм социолог, имате пълната подкрепа на социолозите в разчитането на тези данни. По това се наложи по каквато и да било форма. Последният въпрос е ваш, струва ми се.
Мартин Петров, Младежки екип Европа. Моят въпрос е насочен по-скоро към господин Герджиков и за това как можем да излезем от затворения кръг, в който се намира българското образование, и това, че системата не подготвя достатъчно учениците да си вземат зрелостните изпити, което пък отваря една дупка, за което е хубаво за преподавателите, за допълнителен доход, наречен частни уроци, което пък от друга страна системата не слуша преподавателите за това какво учениците реално се нуждаят да получат като знания. И другият ми въпрос, който е като доброволец по EBS, Европейски доброволчески служби, аз получавах 400 евро. Моля да учителите, които получават повече, да си вдигнат ръка. Благодаря ви.
За темата за възнаграждението, аз казах приблизително същото. В тази презентация видяхте, че съотношението на възнагражденията между учители и други хора с подобна квалификация са 82%, да кажем, към 100, докато при нас е горе-долу 50 към 100. Така че този проблем го има, няма какво друго да кажа. За лагьосания кръг не виждам нищо лагьосно. Има набор от неща, които трябва да се направят и мисля, че аз избрих повече. Има какво да се желае към определени нормативни документи, към учебно съдържание, към различни видове държавни образователни изисквания. Ако всичко това се промени, естествено, че ще има по-високи резултати на матурите и те ще се постигат с наученото в училище, няма да има нужда от допълнително посещаване, да кажем, на частни уроци, както вие казвате. Това, че учителите трябва да се слушат, държи за всичко в тази система, пък и за други системи. В момента, например, аз съм един от членовете на групата, която трябва да изготви стратегия за висшето образование. Никога не съм канен на събирането на тази група. Неръкотворно стратегията вече е създадена и, както разбирам, скоро ще бъде представена в същия покан. Ако не ни питат, няма как да разберат какво според нас трябва да се подобри.
Мария Сандова се казва, директор на училище в село Пасарел. Искам да попитам какъв е срокът на договорите, които директорите подписват с учителите, когато ги назначават на работа? И дали съществува практика, както в България, на безсрочни трудови договори с учители, които работят по 35 години без директора? Реално не е невъзможно, но реално почти да освободи един такъв учител, който може да е много добър учител, когато е бил по-млад, но с течение на времето нещата се променят, още повече, когато желанието му да се квалифицира с годините намалява. Благодаря.
Благодаря и аз. Аз не съм компетентна да отговоря на този въпрос. Ако малко го перифразирам, може би нашите панелисти ще споделят наблюдения в това дали такова условие, като срочност на договорите или система, свързана с това, е добра или не толкова добра практика в вдигането на качеството на обучение или най-малкото разбираме привличане на млади учители по-бързо. Това мисля, че се криеше в част от въпроса.
I was waiting for the translation to finish, I'm sorry. I think I understand the question, whether fixed-term contracts are a good strategy for, to be honest, I just kind of actually disagree with that, because I think that one of the things that attracts teachers to a profession is a bit the stability of the working conditions. However, having said that, I think that it is important to implement the kind of evaluation that was talked about during the first part of the first panel, and to, instead of having a teacher that becomes less and less effective over time, you ensure that that teacher gets the appropriate support and motivation to continue to improve and stay a good teacher. So we're not, it's kind of turning the coin to the other side. Instead of just letting teachers lose motivation and lose the love for teaching and lose the ability to teach well and then just get rid of them, is to empower them to continue to grow and to continue to provide the great services that they have been provided for years and years. While all of this brought together, when you use a right evaluation system that has multi-layers and you attach it to appropriate development frameworks for that teacher, that's when you will get a successful outcome.
Други въпроси? Последен шанс. Искам да се върна за секунда, като последно изречение към това, което Виджиков каза. Действително, като човек, който е външен на системата, струва ми се, че това като много ще помогне да се ускорят всички процеси, за които стана дума тук, да се чува гласа на учителите, може би и по медиите, може би всеки ден. Това ще бъде една приятна промяна от това, което се случва при мен. Много ви благодаря на всички за вниманието, времето и въпросите. Желая успех на всички и довиждане от нас сега.